Okay, so I'll just repeat for the recording that I've removed 2 of the poems, and this is what we will remain with for the summer, right? And the 2 poems I've taken out is because they are for the new syllabus that will be tested from May, June of next year onwards. But the people who are writing in January, those 2 won't be on the syllabus. So I'm just taking them out for now, right? You could go ahead and screenshot it. Right. All right. So we would have just looked at, some of you who had joined a little early would have seen a video on Pixar and how they use music to make people feel sad in movies, right? And sometimes we would notice that there's music playing in movies, and we might notice the music is sad, or we might notice the music is happy, or we might notice the music is triumphant or something, right? A lot of times the music is there, we don't notice it, but it plays on our emotions anyway, right? So now we were talking about poems, and we needed to talk about the devices in Dulce de Coramis. So devices in there are playing on our emotions, whether we realize it or not. All right, so I want to just take this slide back to the poem now. And we will read it again one more time to just refresh our memories of it. And then we are going to talk about the devices in the poem. Just a few. We never have time to do all the possible devices in a poem. Right, so I'll say again that after the break, and again at the end of class, yes, I could do that. But after the break, I will go over the differences between the 2 different lists of works for the January 2023 exam, and then all the exams after that, because the syllabus changes from May, June of next year, right? All right, so let's look at the poem again. Let's just refresh our memories. We'll read it through one more time quickly. Bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs and towards our distant rest began to trudge. So we said last week that the soldiers were carrying heavy packs. The war had aged them, made them sick. The environment they were in was terrible. It was muddy. It was disgusting. Sludge is a disgusting substance, right? And there were bombs being dropped. So the haunting flares are from the bombs being dropped, right? And then they were trudging now in this, at the start of the poem, they're trudging back to where the, wherever their rest is, right? All right. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on bloodshot. So some of them were sleepwalking. Some of them, their shoes had come off, probably because they're running. Maybe these shoes got stuck in the sludge. Maybe these shoes were old by this point. But they had to keep walking, and their feet were bloody, so they were bloodshot. It was like they would know their new shoes were made out of blood, right? All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. So they can't walk, they're blinded, they're so tired that maybe it makes them feel like they're lame and blind, right? They can't even hear the bombs dropping because they're so tired. And then a shout comes, gas, gas, quick boys. So a gas bomb, is coming on them. So they have to put on a mask, right? And ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. So the gas actually hit somebody because he doesn't get the helmet on in time, right? And it looks as though he's on fire. His movements that he's caught in the gas, not that he's caught in the gas, it's as though he's on fire, or lime, the chemical, is on his body, right? Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. So the gas mask that they're wearing, the panes of the glass are green, right? So it's making it seem as though he's being looked at through green light, as if they were underwater in a green sea, and he looks as though he's drowning, So there are different images to convey that he's dying. He's on fire, he's covered in lime, he's drowning. In all my dreams before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. So now we find out that the speaker, no longer on the battlefield, is haunted by the images, the same images, right? And now he's addressing somebody else. If in some smothering dreams, you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face like a devil's sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from his froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cut of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues. My friend, you would not tell with such zest to children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie, duce et decorum est pro patria mori. So if he's telling the recruiter, you know, if you could have walked behind the wagon and if you could have seen his face melting off of him and him coughing up blood and this being so obscene as a child who is sick and you can't make the child better, right? Besides the fact that you feel sympathy for the child's pain, it also feels unfair. It feels like an obscenity that a child so young could have a disease that cannot be cured, right? So that's what he's trying to convey. So he's saying if you could witness all that firsthand, then you wouldn't go around telling people to join the army for your country, to sign up for the war for your country, right? All right, so this is just a reminder of what is in the poem. Now, all right, guys, some of you all said similarly about what devices do we see in the poem. You may have gone through the PowerPoint in the presentation and written some down, but you tell me, what do you see in the poem? What devices? All right, good. Simile, metaphor, personification. Simile. A lot of people are seeing simile. Where is the simile? Or where are the similes? Where's the metaphor? Where's the personification? Right. So the first line here, bent double like old beggars on the sacks. Then we have the next one, coughing like hags. Any others? So these two are similes, right? So if you have the book, then you could write it in your book. But it's noted on another slide, the devices and the examples. So you'll see it there. You don't have to write it down yet, right? His hanging face like a devil sick of sin, right? Okay, great. So this one too is a simile. All right, guys, tell me about the metaphor or the metaphors. Floundering like a man in fire. Okay, this is another simile here too. So given that we have found 4 examples of similes in this one poem, I would personally make an effort to learn the different similes for the poem. Since if I have to talk about a device, the question will ask me for 1 device, but if I have 4 examples, I can say a lot more. This one too is a simile, as under a green sea. I saw him drowning. Right, yes, Chelsea, right. This is as under a green sea. A little harder to spot, but it is a simile. Okay, now tell me, obscene as cancer is another one. So there are lots, right? Tell me about the metaphor. Anybody, some people said metaphor. Where do you all see metaphor? Or personification, where do we see personification? Stanza 2, line 1, onomatopoeia, okay. All right, I'm gonna try to color code this a little bit. So, well, is this onomatopoeia? I don't think so. You know, onomatopoeia is a word that conveys the sound it's supposed to represent. But this is an actual, we know they're shouting, but it's not, it's a word, it's not a sound, right? It is repetition, right? So you could say this is repetition. Now we could note that, but we wouldn't necessarily write about this in an essay, right? Because it wouldn't give us a lot to talk about. No, no one is saying rhyme. Oh, yes, good. Somebody just said rhyme. Excellent. All right, so let's look for some rhyme. We have boots. I'm going to highlight for this one, right? We have boot. Right. So we have boots, and then we have hoots, and then we have blind, and then we have behind. Right. Yeah, lungs and tongues. Why do you think they why make this into a rhyme? Yep, pace and face, no, fumbling, stumbling, time, lime, light, sight. Well, drowning is repeated. So actually, if you said repetition, gas, gas, and then drowning, drowning. And then over here, his face, his hanging face. Face is repeated. If you could use all those examples, you can say that. Sacks and backs, right? Okay, good. So we can see right. All right. So we could identify some of the devices, right? Now, most of our discussion this morning was centered on similes, but we will look at some examples of some of the others too, right? So I want to clear the screen and go to the next slide. Alliteration, yes. Knock need. Pace and face is another rhyme. Yeah, we do have alliteration with knock need. And are there other examples of alliteration? I think that there are. Men marched is alliteration. M and then M. Knock need N, the N sound. I think if we call it gas, gas repetition, we wouldn't call it alliteration too. Okay, so I'm going to clear the screen and we're going to go to the next slide, right? Yeah, I suppose pro patria and dulce and decorum. Yeah, I'm a little cautious about talking about irony with this poem. If we say irony is when the words, okay, the expression itself is ironic. Yes, you could say that, right? So this here is ironic. Right? Right? Because people expect glory, but instead they meet death and suffering. White eye. Okay, white eyes withering is another alliteration. Sorry, white eyes. Watch the white eyes, not withering, writhing. No, well then not this one. Just watch on white, because we don't pronounce it W in writhing. We pronounce it with an R. Right? So watch and white would also be alliteration. All right. Yeah, hyperbole too. Men march asleep. All went lame, all blind. That is also hyperbole because they're not all actually lame and they're not all actually blind. Someone still stumbling. Someone and stumbling. Okay, alliteration again. All right, look, we need to clear this and we need to keep going, right? So you'll see a lot of devices. That's great. Now, so I'm clearing the screen and we're going to the next slide. The real trick is to be able to explain in a paragraph what the technique is doing. Okay, so now you don't need to copy down what's on the slide. Let's just discuss it. So writing about techniques. So that's what we're headed for. We need to say what is the technique. We need to say what is the example. And we need to say what does it help us understand about the speaker or theme or message. Actually, I take that back. Let's note what is on the slide. What is on this slide, right? So when we are writing about techniques, what is the technique? Give the example. And what does it help us understand either about the speaker or a theme or something else? You could leave off, oh, right. And this tip on the side here, I already said out loud, right? Sorry, let me just go back. Choose a few examples, oh dear. Choose a few examples to memorize for each poem. So for each poem, you could learn some examples of imagery and you could learn whatever the whatever device, there's a lot of examples of. So for this poem, maybe simile is a good example. Alliteration might also be one. Rhyme might also be one. We are going to talk about simile though, right? So I'm giving us 2 minutes to note what is here, right? When we have to discuss technique, we need to be able to say, what's the technique? What's the example? And what is it helping us to understand about the poem? And by that, I mean, what about the speaker, about the theme, or about something else in the poem? All right, I'm seeing oxymoron in the chat. Where is it that you're seeing the oxymoron in the poem? Desperate glory. Okay, yeah. Yeah. All right, one person is finished with what is on the slide. I'm going to give 2 minutes again for people who might be writing a little more slowly. Then we need to look at the examples, right? Okay, so it looks like a lot of people are finished. Good job. All right, and our 2 minutes are up, right? So now let's look at some actual techniques in the poem. Now I'm going to want to write a little bit more on this slide. So if you want, you could wait. We'll discuss first. I'll write the note for simile, and then you could take it down and you'll see how much space you need to leave, right? But if we look at the first one, bent double like old beggars on the sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we curse through sludge, and floundering like a man in fire or lime, his hanging face like a double stick of sin. And there were others, right? But just these 4. And of course, for your own purposes, you could pull out the others as well, right? What do these similes help us to see? A simile, we remember, is, so, well, maybe I can make notes on this slide, and maybe that will be okay. Right, so a simile is comparing 2 things with the words like or as. Yes, good. So Kimberly is saying that it's helping us to picture, to understand what's happening clearly. Most of us, I will say most and not all, have not been to war, right? I don't, possibly some people have been to something like war, so I won't rule out that possibility. But most of us have not been to war. Our experience with war might be what we see on TV, perhaps, and that's not always realistic. This poet, as you all pointed out last week, he actually had been to war. And so he needed to convey to people how terrible it was. Because here they are signing up these innocent children sending them off to war, and they have no idea what is going to meet them. So the simile is a way to help them see what is really going on clearly, right? So I'm going to put this at the bottom because it's a nice general statement, and I'm going to use the words that you all have. So these are used to help create a picture or mental image of what war is really like, right? Yes, the examples above also count as imagery. So you'll see by imagery, I put all of the above, right? Yes, you could picture what you read, or you could taste it or hear it or smell it or touch it, right? All right, now here's a question for you all. Have I been specific enough when I said it's a picture of what war is really like? If somebody didn't read the poem, would they get an idea of what war is really like? If I just say, you know, the poem creates a picture of what war is really like, would they know? No, they wouldn't know. So while this is a great general sentence, because it's generally what is being done in the poem, we need to explain a little bit more. We have to pretend the person didn't read the poem. Only pretend though, because they did, right? Obviously the examiner or the teacher did. So you can't make up anything that's not in the poem, they will know. Okay, so let's go back up to the first simile. Bent double like old beggars under sacks. What does that tell us about war? It shows war is what? Hard, yes, physically hard. Right. We have, I'm writing in point form, right? So heavy bags to carry. And you can't put it down because you might need something from it. You can't leave it behind. It's tough, it's tiring, great. Let's look at the next one. Knock kneed, coughing like hags, we curse through such. So we don't have to explain every single element because then we'll be writing forever. Okay, good. So Colin is saying it has taken a physical toll on their bodies because they become hags and they're coughing. It makes them sick, right? So it makes them sick. It ages them to hags, right? It takes a physical toll. That's a nice phrase, right? Okay, yes, you could also say their physical health is affected, but their physical health is harmed. It makes them worn out. Yes. All right. And then how do you explain this third one? And floundering like a man in fire or lime. What is that meant to show us? Yeah, okay, so the gas is making him flail around painfully. Yes, okay, so good. So it gives the idea of painful. Right? And honestly, if we tell somebody a gas bomb fell and people died, that doesn't give the idea of how they died. It's not a peaceful death, right? So it creates a picture of someone on fire, right? Yeah, it gives us the image of how he was reacting. His limbs were probably flailing around and he was probably screaming, right? All right, and then his hanging face like a devil sick of sin. So literally his skin is falling off, right? His skin is melting, is what I'm going to write here. All right. Okay. So now when you, if you are asked to discuss a device in Dulce de Coramis, and you choose simile, then you can put in all of this information or whatever from it you could remember. If you could at least remember 2 similes and you could explain them, and you have, you know, your opening sentence and your closing sentence, then you will have done a lot, right? All right, so I'm going to give us a few minutes now. What is the simile doing? It's developing the theme of war, right? Which is, we kind of say here in the last sentence, but we could say it at the beginning too. Simile develops war, theme of war, right? But, you know, it doesn't just have to be the theme of war. If the question is asking you, how does it show patriotism, then it could show that people are willing to go through all this for their country. It could show that patriotism is really a cover for something painful, and then you would put the same examples. People who go to war to show their patriotism, this is what happens, right? All right, so I'm giving us a few minutes to note simile. And for imagery, okay, what do I mean by the person's skin is melting? Remember that the gas bomb hit the person, he didn't have on his mask, and the poem says to the recruiter, if you could see his face, his hanging face, like a devil sick of sin. So it's meant to give us the image of his skin actually melting off of his face. Right? Yeah, he's literally melted. Okay, guys, so I'm giving us a few minutes to note these points or take a screenshot. But what I really want us to understand is that when you are writing about a technique, you're not just saying the poem has a simile. An example is bent double like old beggars on the stacks. You need to put in a couple examples at least, and you need to explain how it is showing the thing that whatever the question asked you about, right? Yeah, the person probably really was traumatized and needed to vent what the experience he had with war was. And people probably need to hear it, because otherwise, you know, they will just say, yeah, war's a good idea. Let's go to war to fight for more territory or something. As opposed to maybe putting our efforts into preventing war. Okay, so I'm giving us a couple minutes. I'm muting myself while you take down the example, right? Okay, thanks to those of you who are indicating that you're done. I can give 2 more minutes. All right, I put a question in the chat. Is there any other device anybody would like us to discuss in detail in relation to this poem? Somebody said irony, right? So we will just go over irony when we're done with the note, and then we will leave the rest. All right, so I need to clear the screen. It's 12:09 on my end. So by 12:10, I need to clear the screen and we need to continue, right? So if you didn't finish, you need to take a screenshot or come back to it in the recording, right? Okay, so subsequent to the irony request, some people also said alliteration, allusion, enjambment. So I will come back to those if we have time at the end, but I'll do irony now because I feel that's one that teachers might ask you about. And it's a difficult one. Okay, so I'm clearing the screen. And I'm going to go back to the poem itself. And we'll make the notes on irony there, right? All right, so irony is when the intended meaning is different from the stated meaning in terms of the words we're using, right? So let me write it over here. I'm going to write here and come it down. So irony, I'm just going to write in the white space. When the intended meaning is different or opposite to, right? But different from the stated meaning. So a teacher walks by a classroom and the class is very loud. And she walks in and she says, "How come you're so quiet today, boy?" But really she means loud, right? Which the class would understand if they're being loud. Okay, hyperbole, I'm writing hyperbole on the list. Now, is it that you all needed definitions or did you all need to talk about it in relation to the poem? That's what I'm asking about. We could do the definitions quickly, but to discuss the relation to the poem, that might take like 15 minutes for each one. So we can't do both, right? So we'll do irony in relation to the poem. And then I can work out something for the end of class to go over the others in relation to the poem, right? Okay, so sarcasm is when we use irony. So you could use irony and not be mean. You could use irony to be funny. You could use irony to show that the teacher could actually be talking to her favorite form class or her favorite class, you know, and the class wouldn't feel insulted when she asked them, how come y'all are so quiet today? It's really just to get their attention, maybe make them laugh, maybe make a connection with them because both the teacher and the class would know they were being loud. Sarcasm is when we do it to criticize somebody. We do it to be mean, right? So in the poem, we're talking about irony. And who is being ironic? Who is saying the opposite of what they mean? Think about it. Where in the poem are words said that are opposite to what they mean? Okay, so Kimberly is saying the man, but there are actually two men, at least two men in the poem. Three if you count the one who was on fire. Is it the poet? Is the poet the one being ironic? Is the recruiter, right? All right. I could write down the meaning of sarcastic afterwards. All right, so I'll put this on the list and I'll write it down afterwards. Okay, right. So the recruiter is being ironic. Right, so if we are explaining this in a paragraph, we would add that next. Uh-oh, what is this? Okay, so the recruiter's words right? And if you are writing an essay, then put in the quotes, but we are taking a note, so I'm going to just put a shortened version of the quote, right? The recruiter's words are ironic. Okay. He implies, not implies, he states. Let me erase implies. Oh, right, Control Z. Right, so he states that it is a beautiful and just thing, right? And just as in justice, right? Justice, just service rather, to serve in the military and die for one's country. Right? However, what is the reality of war? Right. War is painful, traumatizing. Okay, so if you are writing this for a teacher or you're writing this for an essay, at this point, include some quotes. Any of the quotes that we just discussed in detail would work, right? So you state a point and you give evidence. It's like you go to your parents and you complain about your sibling, you have to give evidence. My little brother is mean. Why am I saying he's mean? He pulled my hair, right? Right. Harsh, painful, scary, sorry, not scary, give the evidence. People march, and it doesn't have to be a quote. I mean, I know I put quotes there, right? My bad. It could be a quote if you remember that. Or it could be you remember what happened. So if you remember, well, they had to carry heavy sacks, or bombs were dropping on them constantly, or they were so tired, it was like they were sleepwalking. They lost their shoes, all of these things, right? So we need to say, however, the reality is that war is painful and traumatizing. Include your evidence. And then you can wrap up your paragraph here. This is pretty long, right? So therefore, the recruiter's words are ironic. Okay, guys, I've gotten a couple of questions. So while you're noting this, I just want to address one thing that's come up in the chat about the literature for lower forms. Yes, this is a class for everybody, and schools teach lower form literature differently. They probably will do some of the poems we will do with you in forms 2 and 3, especially if you are a school that they plan to have you write literature, if literature is compulsory in your school. You will see these poems early, right? Yes, what we're doing is not what you usually do in lower forms, but it should be. Typically what happens in lower forms, you get comprehensions. What we are trying to do is discuss the poems using paragraphs and practice using evidence to support things. So yes, the class is for lower forms as well. Yes, this is a little unfamiliar to you, but it will help. Even if it doesn't, if you don't end up doing English B in higher forms, it will even help with English A when you have to write argumentative essays, because this is what you're practicing. You make a point, you give evidence to support, and then you restate your point or explain your evidence. Okay, good. So some of the lower forms actually do exercises like this. Good. Because it helps prepare people for writing essays in upper forms. They get to upper forms, they have to write essays, and they're like, what is this? I can say what I have to say in 2 lines. Leave me alone, teacher. But we need to be able to develop it as a paragraph. All right, so I did a little bit of talking there. How are we going with the note? Do we need some more time? All right, so one person is still writing, one person is finished. Okay, so 2 more minutes, and let's at least do some definitions of devices before you go. Somebody asked me to write down the definition for sarcasm, and we should write down the definition for hyperbole. What were the reroutes words? I'm not sure. Recruiters words. The recruiters words are this last line here. Do say decorum is. Right? So the old lie, so this part here, these are the recruiters words. Right? And the speaker calls it a lie. So here where I've put the first word Dulce and then ... Tamori. This is where you would put in a quote if you're writing this out. Okay, no problem. Okay, so I'm just muting myself for a couple of minutes to give people a chance to type, right? Guys, let me just clear up one thing. The person who is saying the phrase the old lie is not the recruiter, right? It's the speaker. So let me just go over those few lines. Keep writing while I'm talking, and if you understand, then ignore me, right? But just to make sure it's clear, the speaker is saying, the speaker said everything in the poem. He's talking about what his experience was, the man who died, how he still dreams about it. And then he starts to address the recruiter in front of him. You know, if you had been there and you had seen what I saw, then you wouldn't go to children and you wouldn't say the old lie. So he's the one calling it the old lie, right? And then the last line and a half, duque decorum, is pro patria mori. These are the words that the speaker is saying to people, right? So the speakers words are everything. Sorry, these are the words that the recruiter is saying to people. No, I've confused you. Sorry. The thing in yellow, this is the recruiter. And it could be that the speaker is repeating it, but he's attributing it to the recruiter. It's like you just told people, duque decorum est pro patria mori, right? So these are the recruiter's words. It's the speaker who's calling it a lie. It's the speaker who's pointing out that it's ironic. Right? The person who was in the war. Okay, can we move on? We need to take a break just now. All right, so I'm clearing the screen. I'm counting to 10. If you didn't take a screenshot, but you need to, go ahead. Okay, so I'm clearing the screen. And I need to find a screen with some space to write on. So hopefully I put one of those in. No, I did not. Okay, no. All right, this is the template for the presentation that we're looking at. All right, so I need to just come on to the presentation for a minute, put in a blank slide, and then we'll continue, right? All right. So let's talk about the other devices that people have asked about, right? What color you all want to use? Do we want to use white or do we want to use a different color? The first person to respond will choose that color. Purple, okay. I can't use purple. Purple will be hard to see. Okay, let's go with blue. All right, so somebody asked about sarcasm, right? So this, our heading is literary devices. We're just doing a few definitions, right? So sarcasm right? So this is irony when it is used to criticize. Okay, and we might use this with our friends because they will know we're not really trying to hurt their feelings. I hope that teachers have never used it on you, but I hear teachers use it a lot. All right. All right. Hyperbole, let's define hyperbole. Do you who remembers the meaning of hyperbole? Which looks like hyperbole. Okay, I like Kimberly's definition, being too extra. Yes, okay, but exaggeration, right? We will write exaggeration. Yeah, so it's something that that cannot possibly be true because it's just too exaggerated a claim when you over exaggerate something. Yeah. All right, so example from the poem: men marched asleep. Right? If you are asleep, you cannot march. All, okay, I can't remember if this is a quote, so let me paraphrase it instead. Right? So the soldiers were lame and blind. Okay, they not literally lame. They could still walk, right? Lame in the sense that you can't walk, not lame in the sense of not cool. And they're not literally blind, they can still see. But it felt because their eyes were so heavy, they were probably closing. They were stumbling because maybe they don't have shoes, maybe they're tired, maybe they twist their ankle or something. All right. Allusion. When you go back through the presentation, you'll see it on the slide, but a brief indirect reference. So for me, the example of allusion in the poem is the Latin expression. Right? And I'm putting a line to show that it's a new line in the poem, right? Because the poem has this broken up in 2 lines. Is what, yeah, okay, is what hyperbole? I'm not sure, I missed what is hyperbole. This is the question in the chat. Somebody asked us something, what's hyperbole? They could have been sleepwalking, but he didn't mean to show they, I don't think he meant to show that they were sleepwalking. Or as in literally sleepwalking. If somebody's sleepwalking, they fall asleep and they get up out of their bed, they don't know what they do when they walk, right? But these people as a group are in columns or lines and they're trying to make it back to where they, wherever their camp is or wherever their trench is, because it's World War I, they're in trenches, right? So he doesn't literally mean that they're sleepwalking. He's using it as exaggeration. Alliteration. So y'all would remember, what is alliteration? Repetition of consonant sounds. In words that are close together. Right? And the example is knock-kneed, but there are many examples, right? Now it's the sound that is repeated, not the letter. Okay, so one last time, we're going to take a break in a minute, right? One last time about irony. Irony is when the intended meaning is different from the words that are said, right? And sarcasm is a type of irony. It's when you use irony to criticize, right? So I'll give again the example of a teacher walking by down the corridor, a class is noisy. So she goes into the class and she says, how come you're so quiet today? What is going on? She doesn't mean that they're quiet, she means that they're noisy, right? That is irony. But if the teacher is angry with them and she goes in and she shouts at them, and she says, y'all are, I can see y'all are the smartest students in the school making so much noise. She doesn't mean that, right? She really means that they're not acting in a smart way. That is sarcasm because she's doing it to criticize them, right? So sarcasm is when you take irony and you use it for the purpose of criticizing people or something. All right, so I think we could probably take a break here for 5 minutes. And when we come back, we want to start another poem. Right? So I will be here. When we come back, we have two things to do. We have to look at the texts that are on the syllabus for January 2023, and then afterwards, and then we need to start another poem. Okay. It's okay, Zuri, don't worry. I just wasn't sure if I missed a question up above. All right, so I'm muting myself and I'm pausing the recording. Now the syllabus will not be in the recording, right? Because that is copyrighted CXC material.